The build-up to the year 2000 electrified the world. Some thought an age of enlightenment was around the corner, some predicted the corruption of all the technology they'd spent the past century building. To no one's actual surprise, no devastating event occurred at the very start of the 21st century. Rather, they've been spread out. Pop culture was definitely prepared for a new world as the 1990s drew to a close. And that meant television, that meant children's television, that meant our old friends over at Nickelodeon. They'd spent 1999 producing a 5-hour documentary called Nickellennium to air throughout the day of January 1st, 2000. Basically, interviews of kids all around the world asking what they thought the future held. In hindsight, this has been considered quite a boring way for the network to kick off the new millennium. Just look at the full thing on YouTube, click to a random point, watch 20 seconds, and yeah, it's just that for 5 hours. The night preceding it is considered a better celebration of time, technology, and the future from the network's late 90s output. To me, this marathon is the proper Nickelennium event, but just for clarity, for the shows that premiered 2 or 3 segments this night, I'll just be covering the segments based around time, technology, and the future. Want to know how weird and strange the future is? Employee a Million's reviewing live action shows now! It's a topic I'm familiar with, but haven't made any preparations for, unless you count this video preparation. The Journey of Ellen Strange was one of Nickelodeon's more drama-heavy shows of the time, but still had its moments of comedy, and this episode, as the millennium turns, is full of them. Many of them come from this character, Phil Berg, an alien conspiracy nut played by D. Bradley Baker.
I have to get going.
Why? Hey, who do you work for? Is it the aliens?
He's on his usual hunt for proof of aliens, but this is more comic relief to balance out the main story, which is about time capsules. That reminds me, after tomorrow, we'll be 17 years away from the opening of the Nickelodeon time capsule. Dibs on the Game Boy. But you have a show about an alien disguised as a boy, and you dedicate your Y2K episode to time capsules? Okay, I'll see where this goes. The parents have gone to the beach to open theirs after 10 years, and they all plan to make a new time capsule to open in another 10 years. But in the old one, they find a drawing Robbie drew of her meeting Alan when she was 5. This wasn't possible for her to draw in 1989 because they didn't actually meet until 1997. They get into a fight over this and Robbie tears it up. Then they have visions of what I guess their lives will be like in 2010 if they don't change their ways. Robbie will be old, Alan will be fat. So they make up and... Am I missing something here? There's a lot of lore they're implying, but I'm having a hard time piecing it together with this being my first full episode. Someday I could get down to the mystery of why this looks so warm when it's set in December, but for now, I'll just say I don't mind the conclusion about friendship they come to, and I like all of Josh's jokes. They have this friend Josh who's a bit of a tech specialist, and is hoping to put some of that goodness in the time capsule.
Do you think the Laserdisc player will fit inside the time capsule?
I don't think we get a firm list of everything they put in it, and this show obviously didn't last for another 10 years, so we'll never see them unearth it. But I'm not as concerned with that as this substantial relationship I've just walked in on. I'm just happy to know that a lot of the shows aired later in the night I am more familiar with.
SB129.
I mean, it's SB129, one of the greatest episodes of what I think is always gonna be Nickelodeon's greatest show. This one is infamous just as much as it's famous for how weird and spacey it gets, so it was a good idea for them to kick it off with your typical SpongeBob shenanigans. SpongeBob and Patrick bothering Squidward, but meaning well, just wanting to take him jellyfishing. After being reminded the Krusty Krab is closed on Sundays, Squidward runs down there to hide from them. He chooses the freezer, but gets stuck in there when the handle breaks.
I'll be out of here in no time.
2,000 years later.
While not the first time card in the show, it is the first to be spoken aloud by the French narrator. It's nice to see history being made every time you watch a certain early episode. But speaking of history, Squidward is that after being frozen for 2,000 years. He meets some Spongetron robots who point him to a time machine that can take him back to the past. He goes back further than necessary and meets primitive sea life, breaks the time machine, and kisses time and space goodbye. You all know how this goes, and if you don't, I hope I've made it sound thrilling and fascinating. SB129, named so for its production code, is an excellent character piece for Squidward. How far is he willing to go to get away from SpongeBob? Well, even as every location he's taken to gets less familiar and welcoming, it takes being separated from everything that ever existed for him to break down and realize what he misses. And the punchline? He's not happy about being back in Bikini Bottom for more than 20 seconds and states his intentions to go back to the void.
Going back.
The story, characterization, and themes get all the attention when it comes to discussing SB129, but it's also a very funny episode, even if it doubles as possibly the most chilling one ever. Everything being chrome in the future is a well-executed idea, and continues to be applicable for the Y2K aesthetic trendy at the time. And there's a reason Primitive Sponge caught on. Look, there he is! And if you want atmosphere, SB129 is flowing with atmosphere. It was a genius move to rearrange the credits theme in period-accurate instruments, and the jumbled reversed clips that make up the time travel sounds are wonderfully eerie. All the different environments explored have a life and texture to call their own, and details too. Sure, that calendar says 4017, but who knows if that meant this was exactly 2,000 years after Squidward was frozen, and the present scenes were set in 2017. I doubt anyone working on SpongeBob at this point could have predicted the show would have still been on in 2017, let alone 2025. I could keep going about SB129, but I have to move on. Hey, the visuals have already changed to CatDog. The way CatDog gets sent to the future in CatDog 3001 is by Cat insulting Winslow's stature in a very on-the-nose way.
Here, start bumping up and maybe you'll get big. In about 1,000 years.
This ensures that he and Dog are disintegrated, which is really them getting teleported 1,002 years into the future. But when they awake, they're apart. Future descendants of Lolo, Randolph, Mervis, Dunlap, and Mr. Sunshine comprise a resistance against the current leader of Nierberg, and they need Dog's help taking him down. Not Cat's though. In fact, they're able to separate the two and give them robo-butts. Dog gets the useful stuff, and Cat turns into R2-D2. There's gotta be a reason for Dog to be favored by circumstance, and this one's pretty flimsy. Apparently they see him as a hero because of a newspaper declaring him a hero in the past. But in actuality, it was reporting a hero sandwich eating contest he won.
Yep, I ate 46 sandwiches in 37 seconds! Yes! That's a new world record!
Why didn't we see it? But what they're fighting against is where the episode gets interesting. Winslow the 38th, a descendant of Winslow's whose lineage has spent all this time getting buff. They squeezed millions of years of mouse evolution into a couple centuries just to get back at the world just because Cat insulted him this one time. And they go the extra mile to depict Winslow the 38th as a truly heartless monster. He's managed to make Nierberg a slightly more miserable place, and when offered an ample piece of cheese by a servant, he eats the servant's flesh and organs as well. This show had a twisted sense of humor, did I ever make that clear? But after Cat almost leaves Dog in the future to fend for himself, he changes his mind and they're able to fight Winslow the 38th off with the power of vacuuming. You see, that's something Cat did at the start and wanted Dog to be more conscious of. Aren't these writers clever? Now this is a nice enough ending for a CatDog adventure, but it wouldn't be CatDog if it didn't have some sour thrown in. It's revealed that CatDog's descendants have been reduced to barely noticed pests, and then future Lola accidentally sends them even further into the future instead of back to the past. Possibly way more than another 1,000 years because not one trace of their prior lives exists anymore, except for this big statue, which was made in their future anyway. Just their luck, I guess. I think it's a fun episode, but just know it's got those CatDogisms all over it. Kenan and Kel got in on this too, with an episode celebrating the arrival of a new millennium called Futurama, obviously named after the exhibit at the 1939 New York World's Fair. Expecting their show to become dated by the time another millennium rolls around, the two stars have chosen to set this episode in the year 3000. hoping that it will have aged better by then.
Next thing you're gonna tell me is that that TV over there doesn't have 3D.
They got it wrong. 3D TVs are so 2011. The story is that Kenan and Kel take futuristic school exams on alien biology, but Kenan surprisingly gets an A+, the lowest grade. This means his old man won't take him to the laser ball game, which is a shame. I hear it's more exciting than Blurn's ball. But Kel has a bright idea. Zap the drive containing Kenan's score with a trash ray before his dad finds out. But he zaps Kenan's dad instead, which turns him invisible. Far be it from a show with these sets and costumes to run out of budget, so I'm making a charitable guess that turning this into an invisibility episode was a choice motivated by the limitless possibilities of the future. I'm picking on this aspect, but if it means a chance for Kel to flex his physical comedy, having to pretend to get in a confrontation with Kenan's dad while he's invisible, then that's funnier than I'm making it sound. This is a pretty late episode of Kenan and Kel. They've been acting at Nick for 5 years at this point, and are absolutely able to make all this entertaining. Even if it's clear the writers only had one joke they wanted to shove in your face, won't the future be so different? Won't new things be normal and old things be older? This episode has the courtesy to make it central to the plot, with the trash ray being an antique, so it's hard for Kenan and Kel to find a necessary part of it when it breaks. The good news is they find an antique store that can give them this hallowed reverse valve, but uh-oh. Kel puts it in an ancient contraption we would recognize as a microwave.
The reverse valve that we came specifically here for? Oh, that valve. I was trying to give it a ride on the little electric merry-go-round.
Of all the items from our time to still be universally known, I was not expecting the merry-go-round. They're eventually able to find another reverse valve. It immobilizes their robot friend Chris, but what are you gonna do? Saving Kenan's dad is pretty important too, or turning him into a goat. This isn't your typical Kenan and Kel fare, and I can give it credit for that. They seized the opportunity to do something new, about as new as you could go, and I like the comedy in that well enough, even if the jokes are samey. The newest Nickelodeon series to be part of this event was 100 Deeds for Eddie McDowd. I've never seen this show before this episode, and just so you know, it's a single-camera family sitcom like Malcolm in the Middle or even Stevens, only if the premise was a teenage bully got cursed by a drifter to turn into a dog and stay that way until he'd done 100 good deeds. And to rub salt in the wound, in this episode, Dog Years, Eddie learns before his birthday tomorrow that he'll get 7 dog years older, and that'll reflect in his age whenever he turns back. However, what's more strange than his birthday being on New Year's Day is just how warm New Year's Eve looks. There's not a drop of snow in sight, lucky them. What's worse is that as Eddie's worrying about his age, he runs into the Drifter again, who tells him he's taking his youth for granted and casts another spell on him that turns him into an old dog in wheels.
You ever hear the expression, use it or lose it? You didn't, so you did. Help!
To the hardcore Eddie McDowd fandom, may I ask, was this a bad episode to choose as my first? This feels like a Brothers Grimm fairy tale. All I know about this kid was that he was a bully, and now just as soon as I've gotten to know him, the sorcerer has turned him into an animal dying of old age. And it's hard for him to do deeds like this. Just look at how he loses his dentures while trying to pick up a frisbee, then leaves them only to have his teeth come back in the next scene. Meanwhile, the family he's owned by is having a tough time planning their New Year's Eve party. The daughter, Gwen, is called upon by her boyfriend Spike to perform with her in her backyard in his rock band when the singer drops out, but she doesn't have a pleasant singing voice. Whatever shall the parents do? Let it happen or complain? Both actually. But after Eddie's learned his lesson, he's able to get the son, Justin, to deliver a sentimental speech that solves the conflict just before the new year. How did he learn this lesson? Just by being old. Maybe I'm missing something here, but this was a strange experience. There is some satisfaction to the idea of an ill-behaved teen learning hard truths and doing good things in return, but they have to juggle that with some pretty mid-grade family sitcom drama that fills up time and distracts from the point. I can see why it had an audience, but I think I'll need to be pointed to a better episode before I give this show another 22 minutes. While Eddie McDowd was the newest show featured, they also squeezed in a preview of an upcoming show from the far future of 2002, ChalkZone. In Future Zone, Rudy and Penny have been tasked with thinking of inventions for the future for homework, but Rudy's gotten them to do it at the last minute. Luckily, they're able to spend lunch in ChalkZone to brainstorm these ideas in a more creatively stimulating environment. I know the reason they're here is simply because Rudy likes it, but there's a lesson in here for schools to give students a place where they can think and learn freely. But Rudy isn't able to think or learn for very long as a rogue robot hits him with a dumb dart and hopes to harness his magic chalk, thinking of it as a futuristic invention. All Brainiac 3 wants is an invention that works because the high-tech city he lives in is filled with nothing but bad or inconvenient ones.
Whoa, you could fit a lot of cereal in this bowl! Am I crazy or is Rudy getting stupider? Both.
For instance, an elevator that doubles as a giant thermometer. The humidity alone could be a health hazard. Not to mention a kitchen of the future that would look like a hospital built to make anything in. But credit where it's due, I like the idea of a microwave on a rotating stand. Now it really is an electric merry-go-round. What transpires in the Future Zone is a mix of gags about failed inventions, some of which are used against Rudy in a torture sequence, and your good old ChalkZone shenanigans, like Rudy creating a new problem to replace the old problem. What did he think a Brainiac 4 would do to him? In fact, whenever Rudy creates a chalk being of his own accord, doesn't it usually start off morally aligned to him? I guess at such an early point of the show, they hadn't worked out every nook and cranny of the world yet. This episode is still very creative. In fact, it was a necessity for it to be creative since it's about being creative, but better days for the zone were ahead. Not the Beavers though. I'm really happy to see the Angry Beavers got in on this too, with an episode titled Brothers to the End? Ominous. Here, Norbert and Daggett are hosting a New Year's Eve party in 1999, so you know what that means? Nothing goes wrong in the first few seconds of the year 2000, but when they take a sip of the punch, they're taken out of time and space and told by an all-powerful voice to rebuild the universe. Don't you hate when that happens? Norb and Dag don't seem too shocked for too long. In fact, they're excited by the opportunities to make their own universe.
Daggett, do you know what this means?
Yeah, baby. No more Polly Shore films.
The religious overtones are easy to notice, and another example of the cheeky ideas they got by Nickelodeon. But they quickly become divided on the cuisine of choice to ring in the new millennium. Baklava? Or nah? So because Daggett wants to serve it and Norb doesn't, Norb turns into a giant duck monster and engages in battle. It's called the Angry Beavers. I should expect some fighting, but it strikes me as funny in itself how fast and how petty their major conflict is. How a difference of opinion on food is enough to doom the new universe to eternal war and hatred. And this is elevated by the animation. This is arguably the most visually engaging Nicktoon of the night behind SB129. The new universe the Beavers create with their hopes and dreams is truly ethereal. It's allowed to be abstract, to be disorienting, even the laws of physics become Norb and Dag's playthings. And so do their friends, possibly facsimiles they imagined up, because it's a reach to assume Treeflower would be on Dag's side, or that Barry can be a taxi. Not impossible to assume, just hard. But in the end, Norb and Dag end up doing what most gods do and get the world destroyed, leaving them floating in the vortex as echoes of a former age. Brothers to the end. Until they snap out of it and it's revealed that Dag just put lime in the punch.
I think I put too much lime in it.
Lime?
No.
You ninny-cum-poop-it.
With all the other guests, they're still frozen, so I'm guessing they've been taken to their own universes to rebuild. But as a peek into what Norb and Dag are capable of as rulers of their own dimension, as anyone would be with that much power in their heads, this was a great time. One of the Beavers' best brawls. Then 5 minutes later, Euro Beavers aired, and the world has never been the same. Finally, a new televisual comic book KaBlammed people's way, all about Henry and June filling a time capsule. That reminds me, After tomorrow, we'll be 17 years away from the opening of the Nickelodeon time capsule. Dibs on the Back to the Future VHS. But Henry and June are filling theirs with more useful items like an important baseball and Vanilla Ice's comeback CD. But they run into various problems getting the time capsule for the year 3000 buried. Not full-blown shenanigans, just annoying little mishaps, like Henry putting his report card in before his mother can sign it.
Well, I guess without your grades you won't be able to continue in school. I'll just call them up and tell them you won't be coming back.
Cool.
June at one point filling it with merchandise of herself, and then Henry accidentally leaves his phone in it. I think they almost killed the guy too. Their faithful assistant, Mr. Foot, is having his faith in them tested by how many times he has to keep digging the capsule back up and digging another hole for it again. By the end, he gets fed up and puts them in the time capsule, leaving them to be wonders for the future. Now wasn't that an episode you can truly call timeless? Despite the ending, this situation is pretty low-key for Henry and June, so it disappointed me that the featured segments didn't tie into the theme. They're good fun themselves, but still, I hoped at least one of them would be about time or the future. Action League Nows is an intentional parody of Face Off and an unintentional parody of The Jazz Singer. They did not think this through. Prometheus and Bob is just about Prometheus giving Bob dating advice. Jetcat does battle with a fish trying to steal the town's water supply, less upset about a possible famine than the new water slide not working. And finally, Life with Loopy today is about Loopy helping her dad with a drain clog by meeting some British drain patrollers going up against a giant squid. This is probably the most futuristic of the other segments, but it's more loopy than anything. And that is all 8 new episodes about the big night. I don't know if Nickelodeon told all these shows, hey, make an episode about the future, but I like to think that even if they did, that some or all of these shows chose to ring in the new millennium on their own accord. And even if they didn't, Nick would have still had some stuff to air tonight. Some reruns were snuck in, including a compilation of Oh Yeah cartoons with a specially heightened theming. The only premiere in that package was The Boy Who Cried Alien. I didn't count that because it doesn't have to do with the future in any way, but it is delightfully ugly. These Oh Yeah cartoons always seem to sneak into my multi-episode reviews, but I draw the line here, no yeah. But closing out the last night of the 90s was fittingly the Nickelodeon show that found the most success in that decade, Rugrats, with a rerun of the season 2 episode What the Big People Do. Again, since it's a rerun, I won't go too in depth with it, but I will point out its connection to the marathon. Before All Grown Up, this is all the fans had to get a glimpse at what the Rugrats would look like as older people. Tommy and Chucky fantasize about being grown-ups, but have glaring misconceptions about what that entails. They think getting a speeding ticket is a good thing, that pushing papers is a legitimate job, and that their boss could fire them by setting them aflame. It's a really good episode, gets you to think about adulthood from the perspective of babies who have no idea what that entails. But also, I think the angle of them predicting what their future holds made it the segue of choice into Nickellennium, which was all about that. In fact, a press report said that they were also going to air the SpongeBob episode Sandy's Rocket in that final half hour, but they didn't seem to go through with that plan. I can live with that, as SB129 already is the legacy of this night. The episode people are still going to be discussing, if not in the next millennium, then at least the next century. As for where every other premiere ranked, here they are on screen after I recorded this. See you all in the future.
June, I have to,
Forget it, Henroyd. You're holding it till the year 3000.